Hi, thank you for your interest in these videos. As some of you know, in the past I've done these videos explaining each of the propositions on the ballot, but this time around I'm not doing it on my own. I'm working with a colleague at COC, Eric Altenburn, who is the director of the Institute on Law, Ethics, and Public Policy. I'm the assistant director. So Eric and I put together this presentation. We're actually going to be doing a presentation on campus as well, explaining the propositions. For those of you who have seen my videos before, you may want to go ahead and just skip this introduction because you've probably heard similar stuff said in past elections. But I want people to know exactly how we went about doing our analysis, and it's really important for us to lay out exactly what our process is. We take the scholarly part of this stuff very, very seriously. So with that in mind, in terms of information, we rely entirely on nonpartisan sources for information. In particular, we rely on the California Legislative Analyst, the booklet that they sent around to every voter, that somewhat incomprehensible booklet that everybody reads, and try and discern the information, because sometimes it's written in legalese and it's hard to understand. And then to supplement that, we also rely on a website called Ballotpedia. Ballotpedia is a great website. And so you can find other kinds of information, not just about propositions, but other kinds of information about elections. So if you're looking at candidates, things like that, you can find a lot of that on Ballotpedia. In terms of the organization of the presentation, we're going to explain the propositions using the same approach. First, we'll explain how did the proposition get on the ballot in the first place. Now, there are actually a few ways that this can happen, but in this particular election, there were two different ways. One way is for something to get passed by the California legislature, that's the state assembly and the state senate, right? So they have to get passed by the legislature, but then they have to be submitted to the voters. There are two kinds of propositions on this one. First, propositions 2 and 4 are bond measures. Now, for those of you who don't know, a bond measure, what a bond measure does is it authorizes the state to sell bonds as a way to raise money for certain projects. Proposition 2, briefly, will spend money on K through 12 schools and community colleges. Proposition 4 would spend money on a wide range of environmental projects. Proposition 5 changes the rules on how local governments can pass bond measures. The reason why they're on the ballot is that bond measures have to be passed by the assembly first, but then approved by the voters or referred to the voters, and then they have to be approved. So as I said, propositions 2, 4, and 5 are these kinds of bond measures that I'm talking about. Now, the other kind of thing that winds up on the ballot, at least this time, are constitutional amendments. So in this case, Proposition 3 and Proposition 6 are constitutional amendments. In order to qualify for the ballot, these have to be supported by 2/3 of the state legislature, so the state assembly and the state senate, and then the voters have to approve them. So Proposition 3 relates to same-sex marriage. Proposition 6 deals with prison labor practices. The other way things get on the ballot is through the initiative process. This involves an individual or an organization getting signatures from people who are registered to vote in California. The law specifies how many signatures are needed to qualify. So after these organizers collect the ballots, they're submitted to the Secretary of State for verification to ensure that the people who signed the proposition are actually registered to vote in California. In this election, Propositions 32 through 36 are all through the initiative process. Very briefly, and we'll go into this in more detail later, Proposition 32, if passed, would raise the minimum wage in California. Proposition 33 gives more authority to local governments to enact rent control laws. Proposition 34 deals with how Medi-Cal is funded. Proposition 35 is, by our estimation, the most complicated of the propositions. It deals with how Medi-Cal is funded. And then Proposition 36 increases certain penalties for drug convictions. After we go ahead and talk about that, we'll talk about the policy changes. What would change in California if the proposition passed? What impact would it have on our lives? Next, we explain the fiscal impact of the proposition. And depending on what the proposition is, we'll cover both the fiscal impact at the local level and also at the state level. Next, we'll present the arguments for and the arguments against the proposition. Now, in doing this requires a little bit of judgment on our part. If we thought the arguments submitted to the legislative analyst or Ballotpedia were factually inaccurate or made unsubstantiated claims, we didn't include that. It's very important for us not to contribute to misinformation being out in society. So we did use some judgment in that, and I think we made the right call, and I think we made fair calls, and we made nonpartisan calls in each case. Following that, what we do is we provide the recommendations for 6 major organizations, and you can see here what they are. What we've done is we provided the recommendations of 3 conservative organizations and then 3 liberal organizations. So the California Republican Party, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the Los Angeles Daily News tend to be on the conservative side. The California Democratic Party, the California Labor Federation, and the editorial board of the Los Angeles Times tend to be on the liberal side. So what we do is we point out how each of them are recommending that people vote. And as you'll see, on some of the propositions, they're supported by almost everybody, right? And some, they clearly fall along partisan lines, liberal versus conservative. And we'll try and point that out after we present each of the propositions. Finally, we'll end by saying what a yes vote and what a no vote means. Because sometimes it's not clear. Actually, in the past, sometimes if you vote no on something, it means yes. If you vote yes on something, it means no. In this particular election, yes and no are fairly straightforward. One more thing. We just want to thank you once again for taking the time to go ahead and watching these videos. And then one last thing. In the past, what people have asked me to do is to go ahead and tell them what my personal recommendations are on the videos. But both Eric and I believe that it would be inappropriate for the Institute on Ethics, Law, and Public Policy to offer recommendations on how to vote, right? We are scrupulously nonpartisan. And so we're not going to make recommendations as the Institute on Law, Ethics, and Public Policy. However, having said that, I do plan to do a separate video explaining how I'm voting on the proposition. But in that case, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Institute on Ethics, Law, and Public Policy. That's just Phil giving people his recommendations. If you want to watch that, you're welcome to. And if you don't want to, you don't have to, obviously. But people have asked me to do that in the past, and I try and be thoughtful in my analysis and give you what I think. So thank you for taking the time to watch these videos. We hope they're helpful.